Thanks for joining us. Israel says it has entered the second phase of its war against Hamas as it ramps up a ground offensive in Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed his country yesterday.
This will be a long war. It is our second war of independence. We will fight and we will not surrender. We will not withdraw.
Israel's defense forces have released video showing armored vehicles they say that are moving into Gaza. Netanyahu says troops are being deployed through the Gaza Strip. One person who has an idea of what it would take to defeat Hamas is former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. Bennett led the country from 2021 to 2022. He was also defense minister and has served with Israel's defense forces. I spoke to him this morning about Israel's response, the attacks, and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, as well as the Prime Minister's leadership. Former Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, nice to see you this morning. Thank you for the time.
Thanks. Great being here.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, as you know, says Israel's now in the second phase of this war as it ramps up a ground offensive in Gaza. And I know that there's some troops now on the ground in Gaza. What would you expect to happen in the coming days?
We're going to intensify the attack on Hamas. We've already allowed hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in northern Gaza to evacuate for their own safety to safe havens in the southern part of Gaza. And our goal is a total victory over Hamas, to eliminate Hamas from the face of earth.
Mr. Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, also met with families of Israelis being held hostage just yesterday. And I wonder how you think that complicates the ground invasion, both as a former Prime Minister and of course, as a former member of the IDF.
Well, actually, I think the ground invasion only increases the pressure on Hamas. So, in fact, it only helps in the process of ultimately bringing back the kidnapped Israelis.
How do you mean? In what way?
Well, the moment Hamas feels the fire on its feet and us getting closer, it has much more pressure on it. As long as we're outside of Gaza and not, applying physical pressure on Hamas, then they can wait for months, years. But when they see that we're coming, it accelerates the pace of everything, including negotiations to release the hostages.
You have expressed, or you have sort of laid out your own views about what should be done in terms of trying to attack Hamas. Can you give us an idea of what you think should happen? And I wonder whether you've given that advice directly to the current government.
The plan has been given to many members of the current cabinet, and I think gradually we're all moving towards the same place, which is squeezing Hamas with patience. We've got patience. We don't need to view time necessarily as against us. It might take weeks, months, and even years. But when we know our objective, and it's crystal clear to eliminate Hamas from Gaza until the very last one is either dead, the terrorist is either dead or expelled from Gaza forever, and the release of the hostages, so we can gradually squeeze Hamas more and more, dry them out. We don't have to go in and fight in every single tunnel, Viet Cong style. We can play our advantages. So I think, by and large, IDF has already begun doing it. We've been attacking on the periphery neighborhoods of Gaza, and gradually get to
I'll come back to, I have another question about your plan. I'll come back to that, but I do want to raise, obviously you mentioned it off the top, the civilian Palestinians involved here. Again, today Israel warned people to move to what they call a humanitarian zone, southern Gaza. Are you worried, though, that the rising number of civilian deaths will hurt support for Israel around the world? You do see increasing calls for a ceasefire, for instance, and I wonder whether you think that is has a potential to damage Israel's reputation.
Well, the most important thing for Israel's future, and I would also say for the free world, is to eradicate radical Islamic terrorism, because the West is next, and what we see here happened in London, happened in Paris, happened in Boston, but it's only really the very beginning. And the West has to have moral clarity as to what's going on here. It's a battle between values of life and an ideology of death, and we have to prevail. And it's going to take time. We will not cease our fire. This is the explicit government's approach until we achieve those two goals of eradicating Hamas and releasing the hostages. We're doing everything possible to reduce and prevent civilian casualties in Gaza. At the end of the day, Hamas, cynically, is telling citizens they can't move here, they can't move there, using citizens, Hamas citizens, Gaza citizens as human shields. So in that sense, ultimately, Hamas is responsible for any deaths of Gazan civilians.
Is there more Israel should be doing, though, do you think, to protect civilians? And I ask you that not from, certainly from a moral perspective, but also from a legal perspective.
We're doing everything according to international law. International law says that we have to allow for civilians to evacuate from the territory of war, the field of war. We've done that for 2.5 weeks. We've sent out flyers. Before we topple buildings with Hamas bases in, we let and give advance warning. I think we do more giving these precautions than any country on earth. So we're doing the maximum possible, but we cannot finish this, or we cannot stop this campaign until Hamas disappears. That's something we learned, because Israel didn't fully realize that until now. We thought we could live side by side. Israelis did not imagine the depths of hate, atrocities, and murder of this ideology. Now, all of us are united in the goal of cleaning up Gaza from Hamas terrorists.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has not taken responsibility for the attacks. Even yesterday, when he was asked by journalists, he said that there would be another time for that conversation. You, however, have said that you bear some responsibility for the failures that led to Hamas. Can you explain why you're prepared to take some of that responsibility, but Prime Minister Netanyahu is not?
I don't want to attack Prime Minister Netanyahu on the foreign press or at all for that matter at this time. His decisions are his decisions, but right now we're at war and we have to be focused only on that, so I'll only answer questions regarding the war itself.
Well, then talk about why you felt it was important for you to say that you took some responsibility for what happened.
Well, I think generally in Israel there was a conception that Israel can live side by side with a weakened and deterred Hamas, and clearly that's not the case. I think it was almost a wall-to-wall paradigm that has collapsed. You can't live side by side with total evil. You have to eradicate evil. And for us, a nation of life, the Jewish nation, we say l'chaim, which means for life. We say shalom to each other, which is hello, goodbye, but it also means peace. The Palestinians next to us say itbach el Yahud, which means slaughter the Jews. And we, the Israelis, sort of wanted to ignore this fact and feel that we live in a wonderful surroundings of people who wanted a good future in pursuit of happiness. Unfortunately, that's not the case, and we've all had a very tough awakening.
Let me just end on this, Mr. Bennett. Obviously, you're in a conflict right now, and there have been multiple attempts at peace and a two-state solution in the past. Do you feel that it will ever be on the table again?
I think we cannot give any land to our enemies. We gave the entire Gaza Strip, handed it over to the Palestinians in 2005 to the last inch, pulled out the last soldier, the last civilian, and there was no siege, no blockade. They had a choice between building a Singapore and those beautiful beaches they have down there, beautiful weather, but they chose a state of death. The Palestinians elected Hamas in a majority. And from the day we pulled out to now, They've been shooting tens of thousands of rockets. They chose death over life, and they're going to have to bear the consequences.
Do you consider that all Palestinians are your enemy? That's what you said at the beginning, that Palestinians are our enemy.
No, I didn't say all Palestinians, but the majority of Palestinians elected Hamas. That's a reality. The majority of Palestinians support these terror acts. I wish it weren't the case. I wish it weren't the case. But the stark reality is that that's where they stand. And I'm not saying that Israel, because of that, will hit civilians. We don't do that. But I also, at the same time, think that we have to look at reality as it is and not as we want it to be.
Naftali Bennett, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.